You're listening to At the Core with Sarah Friend, in which I have conversations with women in leadership. As the president of a firm, I'm honored to be a leader and have this platform to connect with other women in leadership, to talk with them, hear their stories, and celebrate their unique journeys and impact. This episode, our guest is Sandi Hildreth, Global Chief People Officer with Wieden+Kennedy. Hildreth leads the people team at Wieden+Kennedy, an independent creative agency known for culturally provocative work for brands like Nike, Old Spice, Ford, McDonald's, Visa, and more. She has 2 decades of experience working in human resources. In her current role, she oversees people strategy for the 10-office Wieden+Kennedy network, working with the local HR and leadership teams across the globe to make sure the people policies, programs, and benefits support the agency's mission to be a place where creative people do the best work of their lives. Well, thank you, Sandi. Let's start. We're going to get to your career, but I would love to just learn a little bit more about you. And so tell me about where you grew up and a little bit about your background.
Sure. I grew up in a very small town called Silverton. And at the time, it was about 5,000 people. I think it's like doubled in size now. So I don't know if that's still considered a small town now, but it was a very small town when I grew up there. I decided to go to school. I was the only person in my family to have gone to university. So I went to school in Salem at Willamette University. And I double majored in business economics and Spanish. And then I moved up to Portland and didn't know anybody. And I decided I needed to get a job. It's kind of similar to you. I listened to your podcast and I was like, oh, there's so many similarities here. Didn't have any networking, didn't know what I wanted to do. Actually, I did know what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a chain-smoking stockbroker.
What?
Chain smoking.
That's quite
super qualified.
Okay. I wish that our listeners could actually see you.
Yeah, it was not in my future. I think I was such a child of the 80s. And I think that's what was on TV. And I grew up in this really small town and this really blue collar family. And I'm like, that's my ticket out. I am going to smoke my way to the top and be a stockbroker. And I did not do any of those things. Instead, I signed up at a temp to perm agency that's still in business, and they're wonderful, Boley Welch. And they placed me at this organization that I had never heard of. And this was, in the early 90s when there was no internet. So you couldn't even research companies necessarily. And they placed me at Wieden+Kennedy in the finance department, entry-level finance role. And that is was the beginning of my career at Wieden+Kennedy, which it's now been 30 years, which is, people don't stay that long at organizations anymore. For people who don't know, I think it would be hard for people not to know who Wieden+Kennedy is, but let's pretend that there are people out there who don't know much about Wieden+Kennedy because we probably have listeners right outside the area. Right. What is unique about staying at a company like Wieden+Kennedy, though, for 30 years is your career. The company has changed dramatically over those 30 years. And so tell me about what Wieden+Kennedy was like in the 90s. Coming from such a small town and not really knowing what kind of jobs were really available to me. Growing up in the 80s, we had 3-4 channels. So you just only saw either what your parents did, what their friends did, and then what you saw on TV. So it was farming, education, or Wall Street. Yeah, that's the chain-smoking stockbroker. So, greed was good, apparently, back in the 80s. Yes. Being placed as a temp in this company that everybody was my age. And there was a basketball court. And it was like, if I walked into high school again, I didn't know what this was like, but it was so wonderful. And Dan Wieden was so involved at the time, and you just could feel what they were trying to do, and they were trying to change advertising. They were trying to change the way that advertising was done. And even if you were in a department that was not kind of what we call the core advertising departments, if you were in finance, if you were in HR, you still felt like you were part of this and that you were making a change. Yeah. And that was just so exhilarating and probably why I've stayed so long, if I'm honest. Yeah. How many employees did they have when you joined? When I joined, we had just opened our Amsterdam office, and I think there was about 20 people there. And in the Portland office, I think there was about 100.
Okay.
And so 6 months later, we won the Microsoft account, and then we basically doubled overnight.
Oh my gosh.
So that was kind of the beginning of us starting to get significantly bigger and then starting to grow our footprint around the network, the globe, really.
Yes, the world.
Yeah. So now we have 10 offices. And we have about 1,700 employees worldwide. The majority of them are in our 2 big U.S. offices, which is about 1,000 people.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned Dan Wieden.
Yes.
From everything that I have read about Dan, I never met him, even though I'm also a lifelong Portlander. But tell me a little bit about what it was like to work with Dan.
Oh, he was such a wonderful guy. He called himself a capitalist hippie. He really loved money, but he really loved pretending that money, he didn't care about money. And he was a shrewd businessman, and he was a kind, huge, big-hearted person. And that's how he led. Everybody loves Dan. Everybody had a story about Dan. And David Kennedy as well was part of that. He had, you can't see my air quotes through a podcast, but he had retired, but still came in every single day and did until he passed away.
Wow.
And they actually passed away about a year apart from each other. So yeah, it was nice being there when the founders of the company were there. And so you really got to understand what they were trying to do.
Absolutely. Well, tell me about your path. Sure. So being placed through this temp agency in the finance department, what did your path look like from the start to now leading all of HR in a senior executive position across all of your locations across the world?
It's hard to even talk about because I still can't quite wrap my head around the fact that I've worked anywhere for 30 years and it's been 30 years, this journey. But yeah, I for the first 10 years at Wieden, I worked in the finance department, and I worked as far as I could go without wanting to be like the controller or the CFO. And then I was like, I love numbers, but I don't think I want to do finance anymore. Mm-hmm. And so I was actually starting to look outside of Wieden because I didn't see a path anywhere else. And we had a new HR director coming into, had just come into the organization. And she kind of tapped me on the shoulder and she's like, I'm going to make some changes in my team. And I'm wondering if you would like to come over to HR and run our payroll and benefits. And I said, I don't know anything about either of those things. And she's like, you'll figure it out. And so that was my entry into HR. And I at the time didn't have any HR training. I didn't go to school for HR. Yeah. So it was learning something so different. And I think that's probably why I've stayed, because I've continued to change and learn so many things. It doesn't feel like I'm doing the same thing every day.
Right.
And I do love, still to this day, when you go into HR, there's so many different paths into HR, and there's so many different areas of HR. But my love is still the benefits realm. But yeah, so I still love the benefits piece, and I've kind of kept really close to that, particularly in the U.S. offices, because I just think it's so important to what we're trying to do for our employees.
I hear from your team, so Jane and Zach and Lily and others, what an incredible job you do advocating for your team. So your love for benefits and your appreciation for what benefits can do for an employee experience comes through in our team, because I think we push each other, right?
Absolutely.
And I love that you're always looking for an innovative solution. What is value add that we can bring to our employees? How can we make this easier? How can we make this a richer experience? And even though I know you just see the team you work with, know that your impact in pushing for your own employees helps our team broadly, because what the lessons are that our team brings back from working with Wieden+Kennedy is shared with the broader organization and employers who can learn from the things that you're pushing. And so
that's really nice.
Well, it's true.
That's great. That's
yes.
great to hear.
And so I love that you have a passion for benefits, and just know that when you advocate and when you push for things, you have a ripple effect beyond even what you can see.
Wow, that's great.
Let's get into the fun side a little bit about what it's like to work in one of the world's most incredible creative agencies. We didn't plan this, but yesterday was the Super Bowl. And I know you had clients represented in the Super Bowl.
We did.
Tell me what it's like to lead in an organization when you get to be a part of a team like that.
Yeah, we had three spots in the Super Bowl. And so it's always fun to watch it's always fun to watch what you put out in the world, not me personally, but the people that we work with, and to get to, share it with your family. Like, okay, it's going to be on this quarter, or watch for this one. I can't remember what side of the brain is the analytical side. Is it the left side? The left side?
Yes.
I am definitely the left side brain. And so working with people who are the opposite brain from me, and for 30 years, has been probably one of the most formative things that has ever happened to me. I often think if Bully Welch had placed me at somewhere different that was very left brain, I'd be a completely different person right now. Yeah. And so I think about that a lot when I'm trying to make HR decisions, thinking about, what was the intent of what Dan wanted for this organization is to be creative in all aspects. So that's really something that we feel all the time. How can you be creative in your role, even if your role is not creative? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Truly creative. Right. Back to your question about the Super Bowl, I work with such brilliant people, and they are so good at what they do. And so from an HR standpoint, our top thought is always, what can we be doing for them so they can just focus on their jobs? Mm-hmm. What is something that might be a roadblock or something that's getting in their way of their personal life that is making them less creative? So those are the things that we're always thinking about when it comes to people things and leadership. But brilliant people that are doing brilliant things, oftentimes I'm like, should I be here? What is, how do I fit into this? But I do think being that left side and being pushed into the right side of your brain all the time and really thinking of how can we do this creatively? I think that is something that comes through in how we're trying to do HR at Wieden+Kennedy.
I love the connection between, you understanding we've got shared services, that may feel totally disconnected from the creative part of the agency, but how you can draw everyone into the common mission of the team and so everybody feels like they're a part of the end product, right? Yeah. And several months ago when you released the Portland campaign, it brought me to tears.
Oh, wow.
I wasn't expecting it. I mean, as a Portlander, who has lived in the city for my entire life and has just had, a lot of grief and loss over what we have experienced as a city, but also an incredibly optimistic and positive person who believes that our city will come back, that Portland is what we make it, right?
That's what we make it.
Portland is what we make it. And so there is an opportunity for all of us to step in and be a part of the solution, right? And so to see Wieden+Kennedy dedicate resources to create a campaign that I think our city was ready for. Absolutely. It was like the right thing at the right time, was just very moving. And I think that our city will have an incredible comeback. And I just appreciate that, not unlike what you described in your organization where everybody has a role to play, that everybody has a role to play in Portland's comeback. Yeah. And your creative campaign, I think, was just perfect. It was the perfect tone. And so thank you to all of your team for doing that. I think it's really special.
Yeah, I will pass that on. That was a labor of love and a love letter to Portland. Yeah. Because I agree with you. Our city is awesome, and it's had a few stumbles, and we need to figure out how to get it back to where it needs to be, and it's going to take all of us to do it. Yeah, and it's really great. People are really proud of it. The team around that campaign will often send all agency emails asking for people's feedback and how they can support and pass things on to all of their friends and family in the area. So it's been really well received, and it's really nice to see that stuff around town.
Yeah, that's great. Going back to the moment when the supervisor who said, I'm expanding my team, you should think about HR and benefits. And you went, I don't know anything about that, but okay. Over your 30 years, there's probably been more than just that moment where you had to step into something that you didn't feel prepared for. As you think about now, in this current stage of your career, what advice would you give to other people who are younger in their career about being willing to risk failing for the sake of taking on a challenge?
This is going to sound kind of cult-like, but we have some Wieden-isms that we say in every office. And one of them is fail harder. Dan is famous for saying, you're no good to me unless you failed at least 3 times. And then we have another saying that's walk in stupid. And so that's kind of how I have looked at every challenge that I've had at Wieden+Kennedy. It's like, okay, this may have worked or didn't work this one way, but how do we do it differently the next time? Because there's going to be a completely different set of data points around this. We can't just say, oh, we figured this out. We know how to do this, because it might not be the exact same way to do it. And coming in with a attitude of like, okay, I'm going to learn something today. I'm going to figure out how to do this and be resourceful. So I think if I were to give advice to someone younger who's starting out, I would say be resourceful, try to figure out the answer or look into things before asking. And let's just be really curious.
Yeah.
Think about what is the risk if you fail. And it might not be as dire as you think it's going to be.
Fail harder is awesome. I also love walk in. Did you say walk in stupid? Like walk in the door stupid? I'm gonna steal that, but give credit to Dan when I use it.
Okay.
Because I love that it's like the humility of walking in and letting go of any pretense that you have the answer. And it forces you to be curious, right? But it also requires action, right? To engage, to come into the conversation. And I think that so many times, you can get stuck or paralyzed if you don't know the exact right next thing to do. And I mean, walk in stupid is genius because it forces forward momentum and also acknowledges that you're not supposed to know exactly the answer. If you did, you're not listening.
That's right. And I mean, and that is, I think, one of the reasons why Wieden+Kennedy has been so successful. We are always thinking outside of the box. The creators are coming up with things new every day. If we weren't walking in stupid every day, we would probably be doing work that looked similar to everybody else's work. So you're right. It does force you to think about things differently all the time. And it's in every situation. This worked for this solution, but now we've got something different here and it's similar, but do we need to think about this completely differently? Is there a completely different set of people involved? We just have to always think about things totally in a different way. It's a little freeing.
Absolutely. I felt freed you just saying it. I was like, yes. Well, and I think that so often, right, especially as leaders, men or women, doesn't matter, right? The whole imposter syndrome, right? The idea that someone is saying, no, like walk in with humility, walk in knowing you aren't expected to know the answer is freeing because you don't have to pretend. Even
from like a leadership standpoint, like, I don't think anyone is expecting the leaders to have all the answers.
No.
That's certainly not how I lead. I definitely want to hire people who are much smarter than me and who have different points of view. You're going to get to better decisions and smarter decisions, frankly, if you are not making decisions in a vacuum.
I have a similar approach, and I have gotten more comfortable, right? As I think in my earlier years, I was less comfortable with healthy conflict. I guess I would call it all conflict. And now I understand the difference between necessary productive conflict and conflict that's destructive, right? And so as a leader, inviting healthy debate and conflict so that you can ensure that all perspectives are on the table is something that actually takes work. Right. Yes. And you have to be committed to the process to make sure that you're mining for those perspectives. I mean, some people are naturals at it in terms of being able to voice their opinion, and others, you've got a diverse, group who may not speak up quite as quickly. They may be processing internally, but you need them to share, right, in a meeting so that their perspective is on the table. That's a hard thing to do sometimes, and it takes some time and energy and work to get there.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that Dan loved, and we certainly try to do all the time, is like getting to the best creative work is about debate.
Yeah.
And so that is something that we talk about a lot.
Mm-hmm.
You need to debate. You need to have differing points of view because it's going to make the work better.
Yeah.
And the work most of the time means a creative output, but it can be for anything that you're doing at the office.
Yeah, it could be a process,
Absolutely.
a workflow.
Anything.
Yeah.
So it's a really good thing to remember. So so we love debate, healthy debate, as you say. It does make all of the things that we do better and different.
There is that kind of this old school of thought that somehow debate means that you're trying to gain consensus and you're giving up your authority as the leader to make the decision. And I love that we're moving away from that paradigm and really towards debate is about raising all of the blind spots of an issue to make sure that regardless of what direction we're going, we have thought through the downsides, right? And that every one of those should be represented in the conversation before you get to decision. But ultimately, you still have a decision maker.
That's right. Absolutely. It is just to make sure that the idea, everybody's thought through the idea together, but yet you can't have a team making the ultimate decision.
Absolutely.
And then if everybody is agreeing on the one thing, it's probably not a good decision.
Yeah.
If there is not debate about something, then maybe it needs to be rethought.
Yeah. I would love to get your perspective. I mean, I've been in my industry for almost 30 years. And so you've been in the same industry for 30 years. You've seen a lot of change, especially as a woman in the workforce and now a senior leader. Tell me a little bit about some of the key things that have changed for you and for maybe women in your industry.
Yeah, I mean, our company was started by two men. And so it was essentially run like a family business, even though they didn't have their family members work there, but it felt like a family run business. So I think one of the evolutions that we've felt has been kind of moving from a first generation to a second generation organization, especially now that the founders have passed away. And what does that mean? And has anything changed? So that's one thing. But then moving to the second generation of leaders has really brought in so many differing points of view, diversity in all ways, thoughts, ethnicity. I mean, it's age, sex. I mean, it's been really interesting to see the broadness of how the leadership has changed and evolved, but still be at the core the organization that Dan and Dave started. And so that's been really, really amazing. As a woman in a leadership role, I think one of the things that's been wonderful for me and probably unique to other organizations is at our C-suite level, I'm not the only female C-level person. So I have a built-in female peers that we lean on each other. We call ourselves work wives. So myself, our CFO, our CMO, our chief growth officer, it's all women. It's 4 women and 2 guys. And so that's just been really wonderful. And I know that is not, a lot of organizations aren't set up that way. And so my experience is going to be much different than other people because I have been surrounded by female peers at senior leadership levels for a long time now.
Yeah. How has that supported you?
Oh my gosh, we would need another hour to talk about that, but it's understanding what it's like to be a working mom. You don't need to explain that to anybody. If you need to cry, I mean, it's just, you have this built-in support system, or they will immediately understand like, ooh, that's been quite a day. They're just there to support you and you're there to support them. And I also think it's a really wonderful to see. Well,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
And special.
Yeah, they're great.
Okay, you talked about being a working mom.
Yeah.
You have a daughter, right?
I have a daughter. Yep, I have one daughter, and she is a senior at University of Oregon right now.
Oh, I have a senior at University of Oregon. Wow. I know, we have all these things in common.
Amazing.
So tell me a little bit about what that journey was like for you. It's different for everyone.
I moved into this particular role about 11 years ago, and this was the global role before.
So she would have been in middle school.
She was in middle school, and so she was at that age that not needing us quite as much, a little bit more independence. But my husband, I was kind of the morning parent, and he was the afternoon parent.
Okay, gotcha.
And so it worked out when I moved into this job, and I traveled. I mean, the first year I was in this job, I think I was traveling every 6 to 8 weeks, going to all of our offices around the world. But the good thing is that I do have some flexibility. And so I was able to make sure that I wasn't missing choir concerts or basketball. It's been really great. And I think that was the right age. I think it probably would have been a lot more difficult had she been much younger than that when I took this job. That would have been a little bit harder, but it's been really great. And also the technology was also starting to really get better when I started to travel. So I was able to...
Video calls
were amazing. I was, when the pandemic happened, I was already using Zoom and Skype before that all the time. So like, I was like, oh, this is my everyday. This is no change for me other than I could do it at home in sweats.
Which who didn't
I miss a beat here.
Just didn't have to put my pants on.
Exactly. Zoom, let me show you how to use it. I got this.
Well, and what a gift to her to see you thriving and working all over the world. That's a really special experience.
Yeah. And there have been times, trips have lined up where my husband and my daughter were able to join me at the end of a trip.
Yeah.
So that was always wonderful as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, you just mentioned your Zoom experience for COVID. And now it's hard to believe we're coming up on the 4-year anniversary of when everything shut down. But as an HR leader, I mean, we've seen an incredible change in the workforce that really happened virtually overnight.
Yes.
We're leading through things that we've never faced before. Nobody's ever faced them as leaders. There's no historical leadership book around, how to deal with some of the challenges that we're trying to get right for our workforce. Tell me a little bit about some of the things that you're working on and some of the lessons that you've learned in this new world.
It's so interesting. I talk to a lot of my peers at other advertising agencies. The last 2 peers I've talked to, they're like, what are you doing for return to office? What are you doing to return to office? And I had to admit, I said, we actually haven't said the words return to office in like 6 months. It's just not something that we talk about.
Yeah.
We've not mandated anything.
Mm-hmm.
We do, have suggested that we'd like people to come in during the middle of the week for meetings. But because we've not made it a mandate or a big deal, people are naturally coming back into the office of their own volition, and it's kind of right-sized itself. Mm-hmm. And I know that's not the case for a lot of organizations, but for us, it's just not something that we even discuss anymore.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's certain work that is better done in person, collaborating as a group. And there's other work that's better done alone, right? There probably is, like with the absence of a mandate, right? That the work drives the purpose for somebody being in the office versus being remote.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One of the things that we did make a decision on when things started to come back is that we weren't going to hire any more remote only employees. So everybody that we were going to be hiring would be within some sort of a commutable distance. So I think that also helped. The ability to focus on the work.
Yeah.
The type of work that we do, the type of ideation that has to happen when you come together as a group of people. It can absolutely be done over Zoom, but there's something more magical about it when you're in person. Mm-hmm. But because we've not made such a big deal about it, we hire adults and they act like adults, and it's refreshing. So they know when they should be there. They know that they can leave to go do daycare pickup. It's up to them to manage their schedules and make it work. And so the fact that we just aren't having those conversations anymore in the building is I think is refreshing for everybody.
I'm sure it is, especially for all of your leaders.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know it's such a huge struggle for other organizations still. And I feel for them because they are also working, they probably have workforces that are much bigger, much different, doing different types of work. But for the work that we do, it's kind of naturally solved itself.
It draws people together at the right cadence naturally.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
So, Sandi, you just talked about your work wives.
Yes, my work wives.
And again, the audience can't see, but I have a giant smile on my face because I think some people don't understand how, and I think this is the big reason behind diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? And I only see it through the lens of being a woman, right? I don't see it through the lens of any other diversity, point or perspective.
Right.
But it is really important to have people understand your life, right? And some of the unique challenges that you face. And so our executive team is split 50-50 here at the Partners Group. And it makes a big difference because we understand more broadly the issues that are facing our employees. Now, we aren't anywhere near where we want to be as an organization around diversity, equity, inclusion. As an insurance agency, right? We just naturally, in finance and insurance, we're a very white industry. And so we are very intentional about trying to recruit a more diverse workforce and trying to make connections so that other parts of our community really understand what insurance and financial services even is and how to enter the workforce, because we're so good at referring people we know. Well, the people we know look a lot like us, right? So how do you create those pathways and connections to a broader community so that you can have an organization that represents the broader population?
Yeah.
I love that for you that you've had your work wives, because it makes a difference.
It makes a huge difference. And to your point about the diversity, equity, inclusion, like it is hard. I mean, Oregon, just regardless of the industry, it's hard. Mm-hmm. It's hard. Portland, as we talked about, hopefully we're going to make Portland, we're going to make it what we want it to be again. But that is also for what we do. And we're the only game in town necessarily. We're the only advertising agency this large. And so we have to recruit people from elsewhere. Mm-hmm. And the tough part is they can find community and a sense of safety and psychological safety in the building, but then they can't necessarily, or it's much more difficult outside of the walls of Wieden+Kennedy. So that's always been a challenge. Mm-hmm. And you asked a question earlier about how has Wieden evolved? And just if I walk around the organization now and it just looks like a wholly different company than when I started in 1994. And that just makes my heart swell like times 1,000, because that's what it should look like. The people that we have in the building are representing what culture is.
Yeah.
And that is what's going to make our work even better. On my work wives, and again, I do feel so incredibly fortunate, and it's so nice to hear that you have kind of a leadership team that's like that. I had joined this kind of networking group I think last year, and you were put into these cohorts, and I joined this cohort, and they were from all over the country, and they were all C-suite women. And I was the only person in my group that even had another female C-suite partner.
Yeah.
And it was really eye-opening to me because I knew this, but this isn't how it is other places. And so I felt so fortunate, but also how do people find this if they don't have it in their organization? Mm-hmm. And so I think that's where those types of organizations are really helpful, is to find that sense of community or find peers in similar companies that you can talk to. Yeah. I mean, I know during COVID, when I was talking to my peers at other advertising agencies, it was almost to like, okay, how many times did you cry this week? And be like, well, I cried 3 times this week. How did you? I mean, it was like that level of like, you needed somebody to have, to know what you were talking about from an HR standpoint of like how
horrible it was.
Awful this was to try to figure out what we're doing. But I also have that with my work wives. We just have different roles.
Yeah.
if you can't find it in your organization, find it outside of your organization.
When we first started talking about this podcast, we first thought about it as a very broad, like, let's do a podcast. And so the marketing department asked if I would do it. And I said, yes, and my and was, I really want it to be about something that I care deeply about, that I think is important to our industry, and that I think, is going to be of value to our listeners. And what I've found is, through these interviews of amazing women leaders and getting a chance to share your stories, you are the first person that I've interviewed that has had an experience similar to mine, where you have even, more than 50-50 split. And leadership can be lonely, and it can be especially lonely if you feel like you are the only on your team.
100%.
Whatever that only is.
100%.
Right? And so it's just been this unexpected gift of leaning into, walking in stupid to this podcast, and then meeting all these incredible people, and then creating deeper connection and relationships where it's hard to do, right? Because you're working so hard during the day. Many people have families that you're going home to, and we don't have an experience of, there's not a lot of networking events that are targeted to activities that draw women.
That's right.
Right. And so there are people, of course, who love to golf, who are men and women, but it's generally not going to be as many females. And so what is that thing, right, that creates community for women leaders who don't have that community like you do inside the walls of their organization, or at a senior level where you can't confide?
That's
you
right.
don't have a broad peer group of people that you can talk to about the things that are really weighing heavy on your heart. Right.
It's really hard.
All right. You mentioned one of our core values, I think maybe by accident, maybe on purpose before. I know you're a values-driven organization. We are as well. And so I would love to hear from an outsider's perspective, which one of our 5 core values resonates with you and your experience. So we've got play well with others, own it, be a champion, have fun and live well, or be curious.
If I were to compare them to the values that we have at Wieden+Kennedy, it's definitely be curious. That one is, I think, very similar to our walk in stupid. Mm-hmm. Just always have an open mindset. What I really love about Wieden is, and again, I am that left side of the brain, like I'm a list maker, but I have a list every day. This is what I want to get done. And I walk into the office and it is totally something different.
They laugh at your list.
And what list? List is gone. And it is, I think that's part of the reason why I've stayed for so long, because it is not the same thing every day. It is something different every day. In 30 years, I think I'd count on one hand the times I did not want to go to work.
Wow.
Because it is like that kind of giddiness of like, what's today going to bring? Mm-hmm. It could be something wild or bad wild. I don't know.
I just had this, okay, I know this is weird, but I just had this picture of you like getting ready for work and like getting on a zip line, right? It's like an adventure.
Working at Wieden+Kennedy is an adventure. That is the truest statement that has ever been spoken. But it's an exciting one.
Yeah.
And so you have to embrace that be curious or walk in stupid attitude.
Yeah. I think it's very similar. I think the one is just written in a Wieden+Kennedy way. And
absolutely.
A little bit more insurance-like.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I like to be curious. I think that's a really good one.
Yeah.
And I think, you have fun and live well. I mean, it's a fun organization. It's a fun industry. While I don't make the ads, no one would want me to make the ads. There's this sense of like joy when you see our work out in the world.
Yeah.
And then you see it affecting culture.
Yeah.
We have the Old Spice campaign, and we did the man your man can smell like, where the man is on the horse.
Yes.
And when Oprah said something about that on her, I don't know if it was her talk show at the time, or I can't remember, but I was like, whoa, okay.
We made it.
Or you're seeing the man on the horse on birthday cakes, and you're like, okay, we've affected culture. And we've been doing that for our 40 years with our Nike client as well. Yeah. That is so satisfying to be like, whoa, okay, I am helping people who are making this amazing work. Yeah. And that is what gets me up every day.
Well, take it back to the team. Even as a lifelong Portlander, I have never been inside of a Wieden+Kennedy office, but there is Portland pride in the work that Wieden+Kennedy does for the world. It so represents our city, and it's pretty cool that it started here.
Oh, that's really nice to hear. And you have an open invitation to come to our office.
Okay, thank you. I'm coming.
I will happily give you a tour.
All right, I would love that. Well, thank you for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
This episode of At the Core with Sarah Friend was brought to you by The Partners Group. Visit us at thepartnersgroup.com or find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. We'd love to hear your feedback. At the Core with Sarah Friend is produced by the Partners Group marketing team. Our content writer and editor is Carrie Conroy. Taylor Kapik handles audio engineering and graphics. Kyle Lusk is our podcast administrator, and Alyssa Mueller is in charge of project management and guest outreach. Courtney Atami oversees our podcast production. Find all of our episodes at thepartnersgroup.com, as well as on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Advisory services offered through TPG Financial Advisors, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor and wholly owned subsidiary of the Partners Group, LLC.